sort of the miasma of training studies that are out there in the literature. For all of the way all of you train, I would guarantee there's not a single study that mimics how you train. In fact,
No way.
whether you're recreational or world or elite or world class, there's not a single training study that mimics how they train. So I guess one, what's the value of a training study per se when, you know, even if you look at the run, bike, swim sports, the podium sports, and you look at their training plan, you're like, there's not a single study that actually mimics that training plan. So really we're back to the basic principles of training. But really the question is, so what's the value of these training programs, whether it's bodybuilding, running, swimming, biking, when in fact, nobody trains that way?
Yeah, that's it's ironic that you asked that question because I mean I've done quite a number of training studies. You know, in being a PI and conducting those things, it's in my opinion, it's like having sand poured in your eyes. They're just so painful to have to deal with because and
that happens in South Florida. We got a lot of sand, so
you know, and sometimes I'll go back and with a good amount of my research, but some of these studies and all, like, why did I do that? What was I thinking? You know, this, that, and the other. But a lot of the training studies, even at the design stage, I mean, I'll tell off on myself here. It's like, you know, this is suboptimal per se, exactly from Dr. Antonio, what you were asking, but from an experimental design standpoint, thinking about trying to find something that you think that the subjects are going to adhere to and remain compliant on as best as possible, it is a big one. And the other thing is trying to get something that's can be as standardized as closely as possible across however many in that group, 10, 15, 20, whatever. Because obviously that's what you need to do rather than having, you know, 15 people in a group and they're kind of all doing their own thing. Obviously that's not going to help out with control and standardization. So, you know, it's one of those things where I don't know how many times I could design in a study. I'm like, man, I wish I could set up the training program like this or like this or like this. But I know pragmatically it's not going to work out that way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, once the study's done, you're like, okay, based on the results and based on what Dr. Antonio was just saying, you can only infer this much. You know, you'd like to be able to infer this much, but you can only infer just a small amount. And so it's just, yeah,
it's frustrating.
It's very, very, very frustrating, you know, because, you know, you can't get too intuitive, if you will, because it's hard. Well, in my mind, it's hard to do that without giving up control and standardization within a study. And so it makes it very difficult. So.
Dr.
Yeah,
Bello?
I mean, I second that. I remember sitting down and finalizing the methods of my dissertation, and it was a back and forth of, okay, what are these guys going to stick with? B is whole body. Are they not going to get sick of it? And, you know, how do we kind of find this nice standardized middle of the road approach where we know based off of the literature on training that and the responses that we're expecting to see our hypotheses, you know, this is what we should see with these 6 exercises that we've chosen. And hey, I give credit. We had no dropouts in my study with 9 weeks of 3 days per week. And these guys crushed it.
Yeah.
That's unusual.
Like,
Yeah.
I told them, I was like, I think we needed 85% adherence and they could miss up to like 3 days out of 27 total. And I think on average, we had 2 misses. Wow. And it was always, they're college kids, you know, it's, hey, I have an exam tomorrow. I need to go study for this. So I'm like, cool, I get it. Just make sure this is your 1 miss or your 2nd miss or whatever it was. So I think from a standardizing approach, from a recruitment approach, you have to kind of find something that will work generically and then tailor it from there.
Yeah, and you know, because to your points, it almost makes it feel like, well, then what's the value in the study? But there's a lot. And I think just sometimes I could say when training fighters, for example, I think where the research helps me is, all right, let me choose. Obviously, my goal is the least dose with the most results. And based upon some of the literature or given exercises, this is probably my best shot, right? Because, you know, the great thing about periodization models is they work when you're doing a periodization model and nothing else. Okay. Oh, they show here's this phase. We got a lot stronger. Yeah, but you weren't grappling, you weren't, you know, running hills, you weren't jumping rope. So what I need, and what I would say, those type of studies that you've done, all three of you have done, and Dr. Bell can just, you know, starting out and providing us with this good information, is I think you make cuts. And what I mean by cuts is, okay, here's what I don't need, here's what I don't need, here's what I don't need. And based upon this, these are probably the 4 or 5 best applications I can use it. And I think there's value there. I really do.
Yeah, exactly. And Tony, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's very good insight, because, you know, I think, you know, any researcher wants to or will design a study having based on a set or a minimum criteria of takeaways that, regardless of what the outcomes are, can still be of impact.
Exactly.
You know, and so you know, that way, rather than the whole study just being a wash, if the results don't necessarily come out the way that they hope that they do. So, you know, it's just
every study has some value. I mean, you'll learn a little bit. I mean, it's you're like adding one piece of a puzzle to a puzzle that is constantly growing. You know, that's sort of what it is. But I always harken back to, as long as you know the basic principles of training, you should be able to write a training program for anyone. And don't expect it to look like something that's been published, because it never will. You know, but you got to just apply basic training principles.